Gary really dropped the entire lore of SpongeBob all the way back in Season 1. In the episode Sleepy Time, SpongeBob is caught in a state where he's asleep, but is able to explore the real world and the dreams of his friends. He goes inside Gary's dream, and while there, Gary explains the fundamentals of Part 1, Dream Realms. Let's really pay attention to everything Gary says in this episode.
For ages, dreams have been thought of as windows to another realm.
First, Gary states that dreams aren't just images that flash in someone's head as they sleep. They take the dreamer to actual realms that are unbound by earthly limitations.
Let me not mar that perfect dream by an oral stain, but so adjust my daily night that it may come again. Emily Dickinson wrote that. Who?
Second, Gary is using this poem to say that people can influence what happens in their dreams based on what they do in the real world, especially right before they go to sleep. But it's what he says next that I think is most interesting.
There once was a man from Peru who dreamed he was eating his shoe. He awoke with a fright in the middle of the night to find that his dream had come true.
This is a silly poem, so it's easy to miss what its message is. A man had a dream about eating a shoe, and when he woke up, that dream became his reality. If we take everything Gary says in this episode and put it together, then he's trying to tell SpongeBob that dreams are actual places that are just as real as the world they live in. And anything done in these dream realms has the power to change the real world. But what's amazing about Gary's explanation is that we can see that this is proven true all throughout the show. Dream realms being real explains why SpongeBob's dream self is able to travel into the real world in this episode. His dream is a real place, and as Gary would put it, getting to the real world is just as simple as stepping through a window. And working from that idea, we can see that there are instances where characters have gone from the real world into dream realms without having to fall asleep. In the episode Random Land, SpongeBob and Squidward are tasked with delivering a Krabby Patty to an interdimensional neighborhood where the laws of reality don't apply. A place not bound by the limitations of the real world. That sounds an awful lot like how Gary described dreams.
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
Random Land even looks identical to how dreams are portrayed in the show. Structures are made of random but familiar objects, everyone's body parts are frequently detached and moved around, and inanimate objects come to life. We see this is what SpongeBob's dream is like in the episode Sleepy Time. Structures are made up of ingredients he's familiar with, and he starts his dream by collecting his body parts and putting them together. Then in the episode Dream Hoppers, Patrick's dream also includes inanimate objects that come to life. So it's looking like Random Land is one of the dream realms that Gary was talking about. And look at the way SpongeBob and Squidward get to Random Land. SpongeBob does a random dance and gets transported there. Then Squidward does the same dance and gets pulled into Random Land with him. This is exactly like the poem Gary reads by Emily Dickinson, where the narrator tries to repeat their actions in hopes of having the same dream they had before.
But so adjust my daily night, that it may come again.
Or in this case, going to the same dream realm. But this isn't the only dream realm I believe SpongeBob has visited. In the episode Doodle Dimension, SpongeBob and Patrick use Sandy's portal to visit a realm where anything that you imagine and draw comes to life. Again, I think this is a dream realm because it's a place that takes imagination and turns it into reality. Speaking of which, there's also the Imagination Box, which in the episode Squidiot Box, transports Squidward to a world of imagination. And we know this is a real place for two reasons. One is because after Squidward falls in the box, his body is physically gone. And two, he's able to use his imagination to go to the Doodle Dimension, which we know for a fact is a real place. So we have 3 examples of characters physically going to dream realms, which means that Gary was correct. Dreams are real places in the world of SpongeBob. But then, is Gary also correct when he says that dreams have the power to influence reality? Absolutely. A common gag in SpongeBob is for a character to dream about eating, then wake up to be eating something in real life, like their pillow. This is surprisingly similar to the poem about the man from Peru, almost like the show wants us to remember that dreams do become real, just maybe not always in a literal sense. For example, Mr. Krabs dreamed about making a deal with the Flying Dutchman so he could talk to money, and when he woke up,
I can talk to money!
And this is far from the only time that we see dreams become real. I actually wrote a list of examples that are way too long to read through, so I'm just going to rapid fire through a few of them. Mr. Krabs dreamed about SpongeBob losing $1 on a fishing boat, which is similar to how SpongeBob lost Mr. Krabs' millionth dollar while clam fishing. SpongeBob dreamed about robots taking over the world, and he ends up being replaced by a robot named Spongetron in the future. On a similar note, SpongeBob multiplies himself in Patrick's dream, and it turns out many different Spongetrons are built in the future. Squidward performs a concert with SpongeBob as an instrument, which is just like how he wrote SpongeBob into the orchestra he composed. SpongeBob entered Pearl's dream, which looks similar to the cuddly crab in the episode Bossy Boots. And like how SpongeBob wanted to go to Mr. Krabs' dream instead, he also wanted the cuddly crab to turn back into the Krusty Krab. Squidward had a dream about a terrible day at the Krusty Krab, and that exact bad day happened to him. SpongeBob dreamed about a thug who cheated at rock, paper, scissors, and not only did that thug turn out to be real, he cheated the exact same way. Plankton dreamed about him being a powerful overlord and terrorizing Bikini Bottom until he was eventually brought down by SpongeBob, which is exactly what happened to him in the first SpongeBob movie. Patrick was on a kiddie ride, which could have been warning him about how this man was not a ride. And I have more examples, but I think that's at least a good amount to show that dreams in SpongeBob do very clearly change reality. And that's not even all they can do. In the episode Dream Hoppers, SpongeBob and Patrick chase a Krabby Patty into Squidward's dream. Squidward eats the Krabby Patty on accident, then wakes up eating his pillow. But he also wakes up with SpongeBob and Patrick physically in his bed. Now, did SpongeBob and Patrick sleepwalk into Squidward's bed because they were chasing a Krabby Patty in their dream? Or did Squidward's dream cause them to be teleported into his bed? Just hear me out. In the episode Dunces and Dragons, SpongeBob and Patrick are kicked off their horses at a Renaissance fair, and they dream about being sent back in time to the medieval period. Except when they wake up, Patrick reveals that they brought Squidly, the court jester, back with them to the present. This shows that the events of this episode were real. SpongeBob and Patrick's dream actually sent them back in time, and then anything that SpongeBob and Patrick were touching when they woke up was brought back with them to the present. Going back to Squidward's dream in Dream Hoppers, we can see that Squidward was holding SpongeBob and Patrick in his hands when he woke up. I think Squidward accidentally teleported SpongeBob and Patrick into his bed when he woke up while holding onto them in his dream. And that was originally where this theory was going to end. Dreams are real in the world of SpongeBob and have the power to change the real world. But then I remembered the episode Frankendoodle, where everything SpongeBob drew came to life. This is only possible in dream realms like the Doodle Dimension. And this wasn't a special pencil either. It's a normal, non-magic pencil that an artist was using to draw with. Wait, that's a real person, not a cartoon. Which would mean this is reality. And if that's the case, does that mean that Part 2, Bikini Bottom, is a dream realm? Now this does explain how drawings were able to come to life underwater, just like they did in the Doodle Dimension. And it also explains how SpongeBob was able to explore the world outside his own dream, because the entire world around him was just a bigger dream. So right away this theory is starting to make sense, but there is a problem. Every dream realm we see in the show requires, as Gary put it, a window to get to. Going to Random Land required a random dance, the Imagination World required the box, and the Doodle Dimension needed Sandy's portal. But Bikini Bottom is part of the real world, and there isn't any window to get to it. Or is there? That's when I remembered the SpongeBob intro. Nearly every episode starts with a shot of a realistic island, then dives underwater to see the more cartoony world underneath the sea. What if the window to get to the Bikini Bottom dream realm was the ocean itself? Whenever characters go above the water surface, they take on a more realistic appearance, while almost everything underwater is portrayed as a cartoon. Above the surface are real people with objects that follow the rules of reality, but once objects are dropped underwater, like the artist's normal pencil, it is no longer bound by the rules of reality, just like every dream world we've looked at so far. But here's the thing. I don't think Bikini Bottom is completely a dream realm. After all, it's not completely unhinged like other dreams we see, and it does follow some rules from the real world. That's why I think Bikini Bottom is caught in an in-between state between a dream realm and reality. And to show why, let's take a look at the episode Feral Friends. In it, a rock known as Neptune's moon moves across the ocean, turning all sea life into realistic versions of themselves. We're told that the moon gives off radiation that de-evolves everyone, but I don't fully buy into that explanation. For one, evolution is a process that takes hundreds of millions of years to happen. And if the moon is mutating all the sea creatures, then there's no explanation for why the effects wear off after a couple of hours, or why Sandy isn't affected by Neptune's moon, or why another object known as Neptune's sun only affects Sandy. It instead looks like Neptune's moon and Neptune's sun are temporarily turning off the imagination in Bikini Bottom. And there actually is a really solid explanation for why this is happening. Neptune, not the king of the ocean, but the planet, is believed to control dreams. According to astrology, Neptune holds power over the realm of dreams, the subconscious, and the mystical realm. And get this, it's even believed to act as a bridge between the real world and the world of dreams. And if we're talking about Neptune the planet, that would explain why these objects are called Neptune's moon and sun, because they're referring to Neptune the celestial body. So the planet Neptune is what's causing Bikini Bottom to be caught in the state between dreams and reality. It took normal sea creatures and gave them intelligence and other abilities to let them create their civilization. This is also why Neptune's moon and sun only de-evolve creatures when they're in the sky. This is essentially an eclipse. They block the effects of Neptune that caused Bikini Bottom to be a bridge between reality and the dream realm. And here's what's really interesting about Bikini Bottom being partially a dream realm. This would explain all the minor inconsistencies that exist in the show. The biggest example is the origin of the Krabby Patty recipe. In one episode, it came accidentally from a recipe that Mr. Krabs and Plankton made together. But in another episode,
it's an old Krabs family recipe, and you're not family.
And since Dunces and Dragons was shown to be real, SpongeBob also pulled a bootstrap paradox by being the one to introduce Mr. Krabs' ancestor to the Krabby Patty formula. And the way all these inconsistencies work together is because sometimes characters will wake up and reset the entire world. In the episode Procrastination, SpongeBob keeps putting off writing his essay for class. He falls asleep at his desk while working, has a nightmare, and only wakes up a few minutes before his assignment is due. Except, something I always wondered is, where does he fall asleep? When SpongeBob wakes up, the word "the" is already finished, so it had to be sometime after he finished the word. He's awake the moment he finishes it, and from that point on, the camera only cuts away from SpongeBob when he's away from his desk. So there isn't a point in the episode where SpongeBob could have realistically fallen asleep. Instead, it's like his house slowly shifted further away from reality and toward the dream realm until things got too extreme and he woke up and made it all disappear. And then you have the episode Doing Time, where Mrs. Puff gets arrested and SpongeBob decides to break her out. There are moments from this episode that are clearly real, like when SpongeBob and Patrick are planning to free Mrs. Puff. But then things get less and less realistic as the episode goes on, and we start getting the impression that this is all a dream Mrs. Puff is having. She finally snaps and wakes up to the moment right before she was arrested. And this is demonstrating everything we've talked about so far. Just like what happened to SpongeBob when he procrastinated, Mrs. Puff never fell asleep. Reality slowly shifted further into the dream realm. And when Mrs. Puff did wake up from her dream, it took her back in time, exactly like what happened in Dunces and Dragons. But after she woke up, SpongeBob was the one to get arrested instead of her. And after expressing relief that she wasn't being arrested, the Bikini Bottom police officer points out that she already went to jail. Even though everything reset when Mrs. Puff woke up, that didn't change the fact that she went to prison, even though she never went to prison in the new timeline she created. And this would explain every inconsistency in SpongeBob. Major events will reset, but people will still have the memory that it did happen. For example, there's an episode where Mr. Krabs and Plankton pulled the main drain, removing all the water in the ocean. That was a world-ending event, and many of the older residents of Bikini Bottom still remember it happening. And yet the ocean seems perfectly okay in the present day, and the drain is still plugged in when SpongeBob and Patrick find it. It's like it happened, but the events were reset. And this isn't inconsistency across different episodes either. This is the logic being presented within the same episode. Even after Patrick pulls the drain himself, the world is still fine the next time we see Bikini Bottom. And that's when I noticed a really strange detail that was right in front of me this whole time. There are a shocking number of episodes that start out with a character waking up. Most shows don't do this, which makes this such an odd detail to repeatedly include. Unless, this is how the world of SpongeBob works. The city faces world-changing events on a regular basis, but whenever things move too far away from the status quo, someone will wake up, causing everything to vanish like it was all a dream. Except things never completely go back to normal, and that's where all the contradictions we see in the show come from. It's all these different realities and dream realms colliding with one another. Mrs. Puff went to jail, but she also never went to jail. Patrick is shown to have multiple sets of parents. The world ended in SpongeBob multiple times, and yet it didn't at the same time. The Krabby Patty formula is an old family recipe, unless someone woke up and reset the reality so that Mr. Krabs and Plankton made it together. Maybe because the paradox SpongeBob created broke the fabric of reality. And that is how Gary's dream theory explains the entire lore of SpongeBob. And now that we've talked about all this, I am so glad that there are now no other mysteries as to how the world of SpongeBob works. Yep, that's it. Nothing more, nothing more. Wait, whose dream is this anyway?